And I believe I'm live. Hello, everyone. This is very much an impromptu stream, entirely unrelated to any algorithmic fluctuations that may or may not have been happening. My name is Rob, and this is the channel performance check, the Twitch channel performance check. Definitely been doing a lot more over here, more than the YouTube. But for those of you not in the know, I've been streaming a campaign lately. And I thought it'd be a cool thing just for a matter of record, to kind of talk through what I've been doing for the first 9 sessions. We've done 9 sessions so far. And yeah, I just thought it'd be a good idea to talk about that. It'd be fun. I've got some vino here. Cheers. Not really much of a wine guy, and that's a lie. I do like a wine, but I wouldn't go out of my way. But this Christmas, everyone wanted to give me wine. Who was I to argue? So I've been steadily chugging my way through it. There's a bottle over there. I'm just surrounded by empty bottles. Which definitely says more than I intended it to. Anyway, I've just been waiting for people to jump in, but yeah, I can see there's already people here. Hello, we've got Hairy Nerdy Guy, Matt himself, from the campaign that I'm about to talk about, Erasmus Expeditions. Jeremy Lilly himself, YarDM, Lloyd is here. Die is cast. We've got to do that soon. We will make our return. In an extremely hot take, I'm gonna say wine is overrated. Yeah, well, listen, that's the thing, isn't it? Wine. There are some people that like to pretend that there are different flavors of wine. I count only 3. There's red, white, and rosé, and they all taste the same. As they're, all red tastes the same. Yeah, grape, exactly, Lloyd. Yeah, I mean it's been an interesting couple of days in the role playing game scene, and I'm not going to talk about it very much because it seems like if we're doing a Dice cast scene, then Lloyd will probably want to jump into that with what's going on with the OGL. However, just for public record, just in case anyone watches this video years down the line and are thinking about what happened with the OGL, I want to bring it up. And I'm not going to go into the OGL drama right now. As I said, we'll save it for another time. And also, this stream's for escaping. Chris Wilhelm from Drop Dice actually put the exact quote in. And this is my favourite part of the statement about the OGL, which is they've been listing points about the general reactions to the OGL. And they say, second, you're going to hear people say that they won and we lost because making your voices heard forced us to change our plans. Those people will only be half right. They won, and so did we. That is actually like straight out of the mouth of like a B plot villain. from a poorly written D&D campaign. It is embarrassing. It is incredibly embarrassing, Lloyd. It's just, yeah. Like I said, I'm not going to go into it now, but I thought we would start just by, dating this video awfully, because people will look back and think, what was going on? But actually, the OGL might not be such a bad place to start, actually, because those that created the original OGL were the ones who I believe had a lot of creative control. It might have been the majority of them who created the OGL were also head creatives when it came to 3rd edition and 3.5, which is the game that we currently use to play Knights of the Apocalypse, which streams here. Usually every Monday. And I don't feel bad about using that system. because they invented the old OGL. I don't feel bad, but you know what I mean. It's just one of those anyway. So what I'm going to do today, then, I'm just going to get on with it. I've got my notes here for the campaign, and I thought I would just go through roughly the 9 sessions that have already happened, and just give kind of maybe like a quick explanation of what happened at each session, because I understand that some people who watch my stuff don't watch the live plays. That's not what they're in it for. Totally fair. So I can kind of give like a rough summary of what happened. So if you're thinking about maybe watching through the game at some point, there are a few twists and turns. So if you don't want anything spoiled, then maybe come back to this later. But if you don't care and you just want a general overview, then this is the stream for you, or this is the video for you if I put this on YouTube, which I no doubt will, I'm sure. So, this campaign is called Knights of the Apocalypse, and it's hilarious. We're on session 9, and it still hasn't really come up as to why it's called that. But it is called Knights of the Apocalypse, and this is set in our homebrew world of Main Realm, which is the campaign setting that we have, and this is the group of friends that I still play with, that we've been playing in for many, many years. I think it might have been towards I don't know my dates, to be fair, so I'm not going to say the exact date that we began playing, but it was sort of towards the end of us just finishing university, and I've spoken about this before on the channel, so I'm not going to go into it too much, because a lot of people know my backstory with 3.5 and the backstory of Main Realm, which this world is. But yeah, it's set in Main Realm. It's our shared setting, so it's really nice to come back to a setting that all of the players that are with me in the game kind of already understand. They know a number of the key players in the lore of the world. They know a number of the really famous locations in the world. They understand the different nations roughly, and have a kind of a loose grip on the identity of each. Although the identity of each has sort of changed somewhat in the time since we last played. It's been about 100 years, over 100 years now, since we explained the gap in us playing with a big calamitous event that I'll talk about at another time. But anyway, this campaign begins in the nation province of Orenthale. I should have brought up the map on the feed. It's too late now. If you just go onto one of the games, you will see pretty much every session we have the map up at one point. Orenthale is the first realm that we played in together, so I wanted this to be sort of, because this was a return to that setting, I thought it would be quite fitting for us to return to that realm. So that's what we did. And I don't know whether it's indulgent. I don't know whether it's a bit too on the nose. But I seem to have developed this habit that whenever I start a game of D&D, I always begin, if I know it's going to be like a long campaign, or at least try to make it a long campaign, then I always begin with some kind of arrival, or some kind of welcome, or some kind of event that marks the beginning of something, and there's evidence of this in games both on and off the channel. So for instance, the game I did before this, which was during the lockdown, the main characters, the player characters, arrived in the realm of Vayrilion, which is kind of like our new world setting, part of the setting that is, where they arrived on these great ships and they were on all this unexplored territory. So the first session of that was them arriving upon a ship. I'm just trying to think of other examples now. Lorekeepers, which was the first 5th edition campaign that I ran, that is on this channel. You will note that the first session begins with them arriving into a different country. There we are, Lloyd says, we arrived on that big bridge. So, yes, the Cloud March. So, I like that because it allows the characters to feel like they're arriving somewhere new where they get to ask questions. And there's a reason why they would be asking questions. So, for the beginning of this campaign, they arrived in, and it is a little bit on the nose, but the Feast of Welcome. Now, the Feast of Welcome is a big festival that has taken place upon a region called the Arrowhead for hundreds of years, and it marks the it marks the anniversary of the time that the Aasimar arrived on the continent of Mainrealm. These angelic beings that went on to become, first of all, rulers of the realm. They came and they took over, and then later on they ended up building alliances with the peoples that already lived in Mainrealm, and their ancestry became, part of the furniture, as it were. Very much the Numenorian kind of stance, very much the Targaryen stance, the moving from one great place to another. But I haven't really gone into that much detail about them. But that's what the Feast of Welcome is there for, is because they are celebrating this time when this revered people arrived upon the shores of Mainrealm. And that's what the celebrations are for when we introduce the characters. And the characters are introduced to a individual known as Swiftstone, who is like a spy, but like a counter-spy. And he effectively gives them a job to find a spy in this great festival of feasting and eating and drinking. And there is very much like an emphasis on eating and nourishing oneself, and just it pretty much, like, the feast element of it is becoming more and more the focus of the celebration. Very much like how holidays in our time now are focused more upon the one thing rather than the like the consumerist thing, rather than the religious or the traditional thing. I'm definitely referring to Christmas here. I don't know why I was trying to skirt around the issue, but you know what I mean. It's that conversation that people have, like, oh, no one celebrates it for its reason before, and we're not going to go into the reasons behind Christmas because obviously those are conflicting stories. But anyway, that's sort of my nod to it, is that, this thing has now become more about satisfaction and filling your face, and that's sort of what it's there for. Anyway, all that to say, this is the festival that they're at, and they're there to find a spy. The spy belongs to a faction known as the Dominion. Cheers. I'm not cheersing the Dominion, by the way, the totalitarian regime that they are. But that's what they are. They're a totalitarian regime. And they are at war with the Three Kingdoms of Mainrealm. And Mainrealm was effectively split down the middle by those that are part of the Three Kingdoms and those that are part of the Dominion. And the Dominion is always looking for ways to return Mainrealm back to the empire that once ruled there. Like, there used to be an empire there, and it's fun because the empire was there when we used to play back in the day, and then leading to events through those games saw the end of that empire that the characters back then saw happen, which is quite satisfying. It's quite satisfying to then jump forward to see that we're now in a world where the results of what happened with the last couple of games, many years ago that we played, is now echoing here, which is quite fun. But anyway, they're looking for a spy of the Dominion who is investigating the gate that is here. Now, the gate is this ancient structure that has been here since time immemorial, and it is where the Aasimar arrived through. They came through this gate that seemed to rise out of the ground as if welcoming them to this realm, almost. They saw, this gate just erupted out of nowhere, and these angelic beings, like, walked through onto this plane. And ever since it stood there dormant, but there is rumours and rumblings that every now and then trace magical effects can be witnessed and experienced around this gate. And they suspect that that's what the Dominion spy is looking into. And they've noticed that there's more activity towards looking at these gates from the Dominion spies. So naturally, the spies from the Three Kingdoms who are trying to stop them want to know why. So all that to say, they are tasked with finding this spy. And I realise I'm explaining everything that happened in the opening session, but it kind of is the thrust of the entire campaign to this point. And anyway, they hunt down this guy, and it turns out he's wearing this animal costume. He's dressed up as one of the players who's reenacting the events of a play that I'm using to explain a bit more of the lore of the world, which I think was a fun way of giving a bit of backstory. I like to explain about the lore of the world, but I like to include things in the game that if I am going to do that, there is a reason why we're exploring it here, and I'm not just saying this is the I can't think of an example now, but anyway, what I mean to say is that when they encountered these players, they are reenacting these events. So that's how they're learning all about, how the players learn all about this backstory. And it's because of that they're getting introduced to the world, they're getting introduced to a bit of the lore, and they're also getting introduced to the main mystery of the first session, which is which one of the spies or which one of the players is the spy, because they're all wearing these weird animal costumes. And they eventually discover that there is one costume or one person missing out of his costume. There was like a spare costume, and it was that of a wolf, and they discover that one of the players has been taken out, and obviously his costume has been stolen off him, kind of Hitman Agent 47 style, like he's been taken out and his clothes have been taken. And they learn that this Dominion spy has taken his clothes, this player's clothes, so he can go up onto the stage, behind the stage, without anyone asking questions, to examine the gate at this specific time that they, it seems like this agent is desperate to get to that gate. Can't wait for the performance to be over. Needs to go now. So they go and confront this agent of Farsight, and this terrible battle erupts, and they see that this guy has metal eyes. And I don't know what it is with me with weird eyes and villainous characters in D&D, but it's kind of like my it's kind of a thing that I always do. They're evil, they have weird eyes. But this guy has metal eyes, and he's obviously replaced them in some weird magical event or ritual, and they do battle. And right when they're just about to get hold of him, the man does his job. He decides rather than fall into enemy hands, he will take his own life, and he hurls himself over the edge of the cliff. But they are able to retrieve his belongings to prove to Swiftstone, the dwarf, and their employer spy that they've done the job. And that was really cool, and it was pretty fun, and it was a nice way of setting up all of the various things that are at play in the game during the one opening mission. So they kind of just got like a taste of all these different elements. I guess you got to be really careful with that kind of thing, and I know I definitely am guilty sometimes of perhaps throwing too much into there. Sometimes too much information, perhaps, to the point that it doesn't always stick the first time. But then I guess maybe that's the same with everything. Maybe you mention bits of world building a few times and then it kind of sticks. It depends if it's important, to be honest. And a lot of the time, even though it is fun to bring world building, sometimes that isn't the emphasis of the session. Sometimes that isn't the important thing about the session. Cheers. I'm not going to say cheers every time I take a sip, but it's weird because you just have to wait for me to drink. Where is it from? Southern Australia. Lloyd says, "Hail the Dominion. 3 cheers to our dark overlords." Well, of course. One of the best things about long-running groups is the sort of legacy element of playing in the same world over and over. Seeing previous campaigns matter. certainly. Well, I mean, obviously with this cloth being the long running saga that it is, our Middle Earth games as well. Yeah, it is really satisfying, and obviously it's something that you have to feel incredibly lucky about as well when you just have a group of people that you just know you're going to get to play with. Um, yeah, it's a good thing to have, and it's nice as well, but because I think we have the same level of investment in the world because we've all really had a way of putting our own stamp on it. We've all created different parts of it. We've all created different characters that inhabit that world, and yeah, it's just become its own thing. And it's now years later that I've come back to Main Realm. I think with a more mature way of running a game. I think I've definitely. I like to think I've improved as a DM, and I like to think that it now rather than it just being like a generic fantasy world, which it definitely does have the tropes of a fantasy world. Like I like to think that I've taken time to make sure that there are reasons for why it is the way it is, and there's a logic to it. Even though it's an internal logic, there is a logic to how everything works in Main Realm, which is something that's really satisfying and something that I've only been able to bring to it later on down the line. It's not something I would have been capable of when I first started running games, which is interesting. It's interesting to see in what areas you improve. Because I think back then, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but back then I would have totally just gone into running a game and saying, well, why is that mountain there? Why is this village here? What's the purpose of that village being there? What's its main source of trade? How does it exist? Like, what do the people do here? Like, I never used to think about those things. I would say because it's cool, and that would be the end of it, and that's totally fine as well. But now, I genuinely enjoy those finer details that ground something in a reality, even if it's a reality of its own. Well, of course, it is a reality of its own. That was a bit of a long-winded diversion. So effectively, they thought job done. They'd taken down this spy, and they got paid, and they were told to enjoy the festivities and meet Swissstone in the nearby settlement of Bright Harbour, if they wanted more work. And he had like an idea of like he said that he was going to go after, he was leaving them there. The reason why he was leaving these freelancers to go after this spy wasn't because he was shirking responsibility, because surely if you're like a professional like counter spy, why aren't you the person bringing down the spy at the Feast of Welcome? Well, the reason is because he had to deal with other spies that he knew were elsewhere, and he was just one dwarf. He couldn't be in three places at once, and he decided to outsource the problem, which is obviously what brought the inciting incident that brought the three players together. I should probably talk about their characters. So they get to know each other, and we have Silasta, who is, and this is the thing, because I don't know whether this is actually a spoiler, given how Mike is playing him, but he is a certain kind of elf. I won't go into what kind of elf he is, but a very shady elf who doesn't seem to have much qualms with taking the shadier contracts. He doesn't seem to have any real like sense of, I'm not saying he's dishonorable, but like he doesn't have any qualms with just killing people, to put it that way. Like he's comfortable in just being able to do whatever he needs to do. New player 12312333132 says hello. Hello, nice to see you. So that's Mike's character, a mysterious elf known as Silasta, who appears to be out looking for contracted work. Then we have Obsidian, played by Matt, who is just this most wonderful, extroverted character, not in the way that he plays him or his mannerisms, but just in his lack of self-awareness. Like, he's wearing this pristine, like, new outfit. You can tell he hasn't, from the fact that it's brand new leather and it squeaks like when he moves and stuff. You know, he's never done like he's never been like on a proper adventure in his life, and he's got this really sinister plague mask on. And it isn't clear what his motives are at all when we first meet him, but he clearly is in possession of some power that isn't clear to them immediately in the get-go. And then there's Ansel, who is also, I guess they're all a bit of a mystery, really, because we're quite early on, and I have a rough idea of I know the backstories of each of them, but they haven't shared anything really at this stage, so I don't want to go into what I know about them too much. But Ansel is this really peculiar, really, really tall man. He has like a bald head, like he looms over people. He's got these terrifying eyes, and he carries a scythe. And there was quite a lot. There's still a bit of a hoo-ha as to what he actually is mechanically. Something that we really enjoy about the older edition, being 3.5, is that it is much more. It's very crunchy. And it is the system that this particular group has always used, and it hasn't really changed. It does what we like it to do, and we like being able to tweak it, and we like being able to use the 50,000 splat books that were made available to 3.5, which on the one hand means that it's incredibly all over the shop and inconsistent, but it also means it's really fun and customizable. And anyway, we won't go into the pros and cons of 3.5 in this session, but we do love it, and there's a bit of a hoo-ha as to what Ansel actually is. No one really understands what he is. Mechanically, they don't know what class he is, but he seems to be able to, like, perform these weird sort of spells, and he can put curses on people, and he just seems not of this world, and it's very, very peculiar. He has like these really strange abilities, like he seems to like stretch at times, and yeah. So anyway, they're a bit of a weird ragtag sort of bunch. During the point where they were trying to look for the spies, I should have said the spies, sorry, they were, I thought it would be fun for them to get involved in some of the events. So Silaster got into the fight pits, and whilst they're at the events, they're like questioning people and seeing if they've heard of this, of anyone who looks a bit out of the ordinary. Which is pretty hard to do at a big festival where everyone's wearing masks. Everyone looks sort of out of the ordinary. But anyway, they're doing their research. So Silaster got into a big fight with a prize fighter called Lonuk. Had a desperate battle with him. They had an archery contest where they met a down and out gambler archer who is called Brigid of Whist. And the idea behind him is that he just goes to different archery tournaments, puts a load of money on, and then tries to win back his earnings. But he's a bit down on his luck. He hasn't been particularly successful in these archery competitions. And what's making the matters worse is that he has promised his family that he would send all the money, or most of the money he makes home. And hasn't been able to do so. So they meet this NPC who has this like very genuine motivation for wanting to win the archery tournament, and so that was quite funny. And then they had this magic competition. The magic competition was to see who could make the best spell, and whoever did the best spell would win the magic competition. And they would so that meant that Matt's character Obsidian got to show off his powers, which is necromancy. He's a necromancer. The class of 3.5 is called Dread Necromancer, to be precise. And it is absolutely a challenge in itself to have this massive social situation happening, and someone suddenly decide that they want to raise the dead in the middle of an innocent magic show. So immediately I thought, well, absolutely, you can do that. And you can be a necromancer in this game, Matthew, if you're listening. But lots of people don't don't like necromancy. As a matter of fact, Orenthale has one of the worst histories of having to deal with necromancy in all of the setting. They had at one point it was the very first game the main characters went up against, and it's something that I talk about in the Lore Drop series, which is on my channel as well, where the first characters of our setting, Theodrex and Droskor, had to go up against this cult called the Sacred Dusk, who were all about necromancy, and Dragon Then was this necromancer who was bent on creating a necromantic super weapon called the Shroud that could resurrect hundreds and hundreds of undead at a time. So naturally, when you have a history of this necromantic despot trying to detonate a necromantic super weapon in your near history, yeah, people aren't going to be particularly happy when you start raising skeletons at a kid's party. You know, not a kid's party, but it was like a happy magic competition, and then suddenly there's undead. Which I think that's the best kind of game I'd like to run. I like to run a game where, yeah, sure, you can do anything you want. I like to try and be as simulationist as possible. If you want to try and resurrect the dead in front of all these people, you absolutely can. But just know that if you're going to do that, then your actions are going to have a reaction, which I think is one of the key elements. And I know we go on about it before. I know we talked about it often on my channels and many channels in our community, that's like one of the main things that everyone wants out of a game, is to show that your actions have, repercussions, and usually you want those to be good things. I saved this village. The village now like my character and give me discounts at the shop and all sorts. But it should definitely work the other way, that if I decide to do something as heinous as this, people are going to react in a bad way, and it has to be dealt with. I suppose that actually brings me to I know I'm like jumping here, there, and everywhere, but that actually brings me to something that I wanted to do with this campaign, which is what has really attracted me to, because I knew we were going to be playing weekly. I wanted this game to be one where, sure, we can have these big sweeping story arcs where we're going on quests and we're dealing with particular problems, and there's sort of, like at the moment, we're kind of at the end where we are with the session 9. We're sort of at the end of kind of a chapter, maybe, where like a big story moment has happened. But also, and I said this to the players before we started in our sort of session 0 chat, which was, I want this to be simulationist. I want us to be able to, like, not always feel like there's a ticking clock to get the story done, that we can have sessions where not so much happens, and we can also have sessions where we go off and do our own things. Like, I like the idea of running a game where our characters will be able to, like, make their own mark on the world. If they want to open a shop, if they want to start like their own guild, if they want to just like be work for hires and just go on like just generic mercenary jobs or whatever, then that's something I'm interested in running. Because I know that a lot of the time I go for the big sweeping story arcs, but I equally want to have moments where we don't have to have that all the time, and I think that then makes it all the better when you do then jump back into the into like a main quest, as it were. I say in inverted commas. I don't know how I got onto that. I was talking about consequences and simulation and stuff. Oh yeah, the magic competition. So anyway, it turns out that the people in the masks, spoiler alert, are actually just there masquerading as players. They are actually a cult that go by the name Savage Doom. And Savage Doom, well, they learn their backstory like a bit later on, but for the most part, they are just these. It turns out that these players wearing these animal costumes actually tend to look quite creepy when they're waiting for you in the tavern when you've gone to sleep and they've already set the building on fire. And that's exactly what happened. The players went to bed that night and then they woke up to smoke filling their inn rooms, and they rushed downstairs, desperately trying to save people from upstairs. They managed to pull one person out, and then And they were confronted by Savage Doom, these terrifying, they call them fairies, but they're really quite sinister. Like they're sort of like sewn on black button eyes, and yeah, they're really quite something. And that was sort of like the introduction of the kind of the first sort of threat of the game is Savage Doom. And I mean, I'm not going to tell you what happens in every session, because you should go and watch it if you're interested by now, or listen to it. I love listening to actual plays. I miss them, actually. I miss listening to decent actual plays. So if you can recommend me any, then hit me up, please. Yeah, so that was the introduction to Savage Doom, and yeah, pretty much they've begun to learn that this cult is actually trying to interact with that gate that I mentioned before, and through their sacrifice, they believe they can open the gate. Which, for reasons we'll go into later on, is well, it ain't happening. Put it that way. Or at least I don't think it's going to happen. And all of a sudden, once everyone is died in the Infire, that magic competition actually was host to a sort of like a magic circle on the ground, and that was actually planted there to help amplify a great sacrifice as Savage Doom begins slaughtering everyone in the festival of Welcome. And you learn that, yeah, this is a place for feasting where they are sacrificing these poor festival goers to a greater hunger, a savage hunger. And the gate triggers, and all of a sudden they are confronted with this mysterious figure walking through the gate, and everyone is dumbfounded. Everyone is absolutely taken aback as a Githyanki, of all things, is standing there. And this Githyanki, I'm not going to say the exact number he is, but like, he is a significantly more powerful entity than what the players are used to, and they go and speak to him. This is after they've defeated the Savage Doom members. They go to talk to him, and he warns them of he warns them that a hunger has driven him here, and that he won't kill them, but he will make them suffer. And he absolutely goes to town on them. He appears to be a monk of some kind, but is also in possession of psionic abilities. He beats Silaster unconscious. Obsidian tries to jump off a cliff and activate a featherfall ring, just so gravity will take him away from the fight. But this Githyanki uses its psionic ability to telekinetically pull him back up and then beat the crap out of him as well. And then Ansel's trying to run away, trying to get to a horse, and the monk's movement speed is so fast he catches up to him on the next round and then just beats him until he's unconscious. And they are left just in the wake of this of this disaster, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this other entity just comes into existence before them, and just beats the hell out of them. And that was pretty much the first two sessions. The first session ended with them sort of being confronted by the Githyanki that emerged, and then the second session sort of started with them like facing off against him and suddenly realizing, oh my god, we can't beat this guy. And that's I mean, to be honest with you, I think I have kind of been leaning into some of the staples of like a Hallmark D&D game. Like I guess they are probably tropes, like running into like the enemy that is much more powerful than them, for example. That's something that can be done badly. I think it can be done badly. I like to think that there was reason behind it. You know, like when you start a video game and you see the big bad. I'm trying to think of an example now. Jedi Fallen Order. Let's take Jedi Fallen Order for an example. You're Cal Kestis, the Jedi on the run, and suddenly the Inquisitors are upon you, and you're facing the second sister. Was it second sister? One of those sisters, one of the Inquisitors, and you fight her for a bit, and then she puts you on your ass, and then a cutscene happens, which means he gets away just in the nick of time. But I like to think that that there are good reasons for why what happened that just haven't been raised yet. So. But yeah, I mean, I think that is a tricky one, and that is something actually that we've experienced once again in the campaign lately, was them coming up against entities that are more powerful than them, and them losing battles, which I actually quite enjoy, because it doesn't actually happen that much. And to be honest with you, it hasn't really happened an awful lot in the history of this particular gaming group. I don't think. I can't recall many fights that ended with like a full-on... No, that's not true. That's not true, actually. There have been a few. But it doesn't happen often in any game, I don't think, where the player characters are confronted with, like, a loss that they then have to come away from and, like, and consider why it happened and try and get better. And I'm really pleased to say that the players have really taken on board when those two... Because it has happened twice in this campaign. When those two things have happened, they haven't been sore about it, which is nice, because there's every chance that they could turn around and say, well, there's no way we're going to win that, to which my answer will be, well, no, there's no way you could win that, but you know, there could potentially be ways out of it, there could be ways around it, but fighting isn't always the solution. I guess that's what I'm trying to like lean into here, is that perhaps there are other ways. That being said, the most recent opportunity that happened, and indeed that opportunity, you could argue that they weren't gonna get away from it either. So yeah, it's a tricky one. But I think it's about execution. I think, and especially if you keep doing it as well. Like, I like to think I'm not. I wouldn't overuse that element of a story where, you know, your characters are constantly losing a fight. They can't get like an attack in edgeways. Like, everything they go against is just beating the crap out of them. Thankfully, they've had so many good victories, but also some victories that have been snatched from them, sadly. Let's have some wine. How are we all doing? If there is anyone there, I don't even know. I don't think I have any way of telling if anyone's still there. It doesn't tell me how many people is watching. But if people are watching and interested or want to ask me questions or anything, please feel free to do so. Any interest or any questions about the game. Something else as well, actually. I am very aware that there are a core group of people that have always watched pretty much anything that I put on my channel. And it is not unnoticed, and it is I'm very grateful for that. So if it is one of you who are watching right now that always watches my stuff, no matter how much I ramble, no matter how much it's by the seat of your pants and thrown together, I do really appreciate you watching, so thank you. And it's to those audience members that I speak to now, because you're the ones that always watch my stuff. I'm thinking about doing other stuff with Performance Check, either on Twitch and on YouTube. But exactly what that is, I'm not entirely sure. So if there's a particular element to anything that you've seen me do in the past, or anything you would like to see me try, then I would really appreciate you letting me know. And please let me know if there's anything... Yeah, there's anything in particular that you think this channel could... I guess benefit from. Like, if there's a particular kind of content that you thought, no, that was spot on, we want that, then tell me, and I will see if we can throw it together. Because, yeah, I just really appreciate the people that have stuck around since I started this thing. God, in 2016, I think? No, earlier, I think. I don't know, I'll have to look it up. It does tell you when you started your YouTube channel, I'm pretty sure, if you go in your settings or something. Anyway, that's a little aside, I am very aware that I've just been rambling. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at my notes now. What else has happened? They've gone into the city. They went after some pirates at one point. Like, this is, from the get go, like I said earlier, I wanted them to be able to just go off and do the odd job, and they learned of a pirate crew that had been operating upon the Barbed Bay, which is the sort of the coastal region they had arrived in, and there was a price on the head of the pirate crew called the Sea Snakes, and its captain Verates, or their captain Verates. So they got to go and sort of do that for a little while. It hasn't all been a thrust to like the one conclusion. It has been they've been able to take on some pirates and made some coin for it. They also took a mercenary job to relieve a besieged settlement that was being a trading post that was sort of beset by bandits. So they went in the place of a guild called the Bronze Banners at one point to relieve the trading post of Loth. That was actually quite a recent session. I think that was session 8, session 7, something like that. But that was fun because the bandits who were attacking that trade post said that they had unexpected allies, and it had turned out that they had like an unsteady alliance with a warband of hobgoblins, and it had turned out that this was the same warband of hobgoblins that the players had like encountered in another session, kind of hinting that this is sort of like they operate across the entire region, and this is one of their major forces going to work against like an entire trading post. And for those that know hobgoblins, like, that they're the more militant of their kin. They're far more organized and efficient in their way. They're kind of military, whereas just normal goblins are a bit more chaotic and a bit more just mad. Hobgoblins are a bit more focused, and that makes them an incredibly dangerous enemy. And they went up against like a whole war band of hobgoblins, and they just had like this small Motte and Bailey to hold against this force, and that was a fun session because that was a whole session of them just digging their heels in and fighting back this enemy in defense of this trading post and those that have made it their livelihoods effectively, which was cool. Tarleman, who actually held his own. Every now and then you have an NPC that you just sort of like make up on the fly, and I statted him out because I thought, well, one thing I don't like, right, and I've had this in a few games that I've played in the past, is when like an NPC gets you to do something, but what that NPC is trying to get you to do is like fix their entire life. Like, oh, you need to help me defend my farm or my home, or you need to go and get this. And it's like, well, if it's so important, then why haven't you done this? There needs to be like either a good reason, or like if it's defending your home, then you can't just pay people to help you do it and then sit back, particularly if your loved ones are there as well, which they were in this situation. So I was like, well, I have no choice but to just give this NPC, no matter how lame it is, and no matter how lame he is, he has to be statted. He has to be able to pick up a weapon, at least have a turn in combat to show that he's also he's doing everything he can to protect his home, and actually paid off quite well. Actually, I think he seemed to struck a chord with the players, that old Tarleman. He turned out to be quite a legend. He did roll incredibly well. Like, he didn't have, like, he wasn't even a level 1 character. Like, he just had a few like generic NPC stats, and somehow he just kept rolling like a bomb. I thought he was going to heroically die and die defending his family or whatever, or die defending his home. but he actually like pulled through. Both him and his wife had like one hit point by the end of that whole fight. Like somehow they survived, and I was at one point I was kind of a bit like, oh, it might have been better if one of them had died maybe, and then it would have been like quite tragic. And but then at the same time, it's better in a way because then the players, I guess, then feel like they had achieved their goal. They had 100% protected that trading post. They had 100% earned the money they made from doing it. So that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Like, even though you leave it up to chaos, like that, even just a small thing, like I say a small thing, is not necessarily a small thing, and that sounds negative. But like the death of an NPC, it shouldn't be a small thing, should it really? But even something like that is what I meant to say, can completely change the feeling of an entire session. If Talaman had been slain, I think like their whole looking back at that, they will now then think, oh man, like, and be maybe gutted about it, maybe have like bad feelings about them having ever been in there in the first place, taking the job. Changes how the campaign feels, particularly if you keep losing. Like there's one thing losing a battle where your characters get beaten, but it's another entirely if you can't ever protect anyone. Then you start feeling like, oh man, what are we in this for if we can't protect people? Not that I'm saying that every character's job should be to protect people, but you know what I mean. More wine? I think so. Hang on. Oh dear. Oh dear. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the OGL that much, but I've been following it for. I keep saying I'm not going to talk about it, and they're talking about it. It's just like it's both a negative thing and a positive thing. Because going back to those people that created 3.5, that then moved away in what we call the Great Schism, they obviously went away to create Pathfinder. And it's another Christmas bottle down, my goodness. Yeah, they went away to create Pathfinder. And it is now Paizo. And those folks over at Pathfinder who have been there since 3.5 that are now, now leading the way for the OG open source OSC or whatever it was called. I'll link it if I remember to. But effectively, like the new proper open gaming license rather than open gaming license in inverted commas, where we can just take anything that we want to take and stop anything we want to stop. I can't get over that response. We win too. No, you don't. Anyway. Oh dear. Dreadful. What am I going to talk about now? Because I've kind of jumped all over the shop. I've jumped ahead like a whole bunch. What else did they do? Yeah, they fought pirates. They fought a number of mercenaries from a mercenary guild called the Blood Judges, which was pretty fun. That was the session that recorded onto the YouTube, or rather, I streamed without my audio, which was a shame, because that was I do love to run a good encounter. I particularly enjoy like an energetic combat encounter, and I was really proud of the combat encounter that we had in that session. Effectively, the player characters were sort of like staking out the rooftop of the Bronze Banners, which is not only the name of a mercenary guild, it's also the name of the place, and it has these big bronze banners that float above it that in the wind, whatever. So they're there guarding that and staking this place out, and then they go to investigate this meeting of Farsight, which were those spies that I was talking about earlier. Farsight agents are I don't know if I explained Farsight. Farsight are the spy agents of the Dominion. and they were staking out this meeting in an attempt to overhear what they were going to say. Swiftstone, the dwarf, was helping them as well. And they moved in for to sort of ambush them, to take them, because they thought, oh, there's only two of them. And then they had learned that the spy that they'd attacked at the Feast of Welcome had been attacked, and had also allegedly survived, which meant that they knew that meeting was going to be compromised, because they knew they would have found the intel that he'd left behind. So they then monopolized on that, and then sort of trapped their trap. So they sprung their trap, and then another trap sprung on them, and they'd hired these mercenaries called the Blood Judges, which use weird blood rituals to empower their fighting stances and stuff. Like anytime they fire an arrow, they cut their thumb on the flint of the arrow before firing it, and then this fountain of blood power slams into the enemy and causes bleeding damage and all sorts. They're vicious, terrifying, cult-like mercenary group. Who'd have thought when they're called the Blood Judges? But anyway, they have these blood powers, and they drop these ladders down over from one rooftop to another. So we have this really dynamic battlefield of the enemy are able to move from different rooftops to move closer, and there's all these battles on these bridges over the streets far below, and it was a really fun encounter to run, and the players wasted no time in monopolizing it. I will absolutely give them credit; they are incredibly tactical players when it comes to a battle. It is often a challenge to be able to answer some of their maneuvers, and don't get me wrong, I'm never going to try and outmaneuver them if I haven't got anything. I'm not going to make anything up. If I can, within the mechanics of the game, I will definitely play to the strengths of the enemies. But sometimes, they'll just play and you're like, wow, they absolutely smashed that. They summoned in that undead at the right time. They laid that curse on that particular enemy, who then was unable to fight effectively or whatever. And they turned it around. I actually got asked by Dom, who plays Ansel, something about the preparing for their particular party makeup, because of the style of play that they have, not only as role playing but mechanically as well. They are a weird bunch. In fact, I will actually bring up what Dom actually said. He said, what did he say? What about talking about dealing with the non-standard party maker? We don't have a tank, a skill person, a proper caster, a healer, or a face. And he's absolutely right. They didn't really fit any of those roles. I can't have, there isn't sort of an emphasis on stealth so much, nor full-on battle, nor out and out casting. And I guess my answer really, truthfully, is that I don't prep specifically to say, well, I know they're going to be able to handle this, because then that's me self-consciously creating a solution to the problem I'm already giving you. It is an old adage, and it has definitely circulated around our community for quite some time. The communities I play in and I interact with online and stuff. You'll have heard me say it 100 times. You'll have heard other people that I hang out with 100 times that I've forgotten how it goes. That's it. Prep problems, not solutions. That's the key. It's not my job to come up with the solutions. It's only my job to come up with the problems. The best thing about role-playing games is using your imagination and your ingenuity to solve the problems, because it's far more rewarding if a player goes, oh, there's I don't know, oh, there's a barrel of pitch there. I bet if we move that over there, we can detonate that barrel of pitch when the people come through, and then that will save us from having to fight them. We can escape whilst they're dealing with the fire that's spreading across them or whatever. that's just an example I literally pulled out of the air. Maybe it wasn't a particularly good one, but you know what I mean. Like, if you come up with it yourself, then it feels far more rewarding than if the GM has sort of like gone, oh, maybe you spot this over here and it's actually an escape route that you can use, or it's not as satisfying. So I guess I don't think I have really prepped to go against that particular party makeup, but I also understand, like, I understand that I can't also be. Well, no, that's it. I don't have to not do anything. I can literally put anything there, and it would be down to you to solve it. But I also do know what Dom means when he says, like, there are certain things in a D&D session that you kind of like, that you can kind of not fall into, but like make up a session, and that's the reason we play the game. Like, we like exploration, we like delving into dungeons, we like getting into battles with this particular style of D&D anyway. We like getting into battles, like developing our characters, we like developing our inter-character relationships, and we like exploring their goals and stuff. None of that gets stopped by what class they are. The only thing I will say is that it's less they just have less chance to spot that trap, or less chance to no, I don't know. I think they'll always find a way, and I think, I don't know what point I'm making. I'm sort of spiraling. What I'm saying is that it doesn't matter what I put in front of them. At the end of the day, I'm confident that they will be able to come up with something that will overcome it, and if they can't, then that's the challenge that beats them. And again, there should be challenges that beat player characters. So there's been all sorts of other stuff that's been happening in the campaign. Another favourite moment of mine that's happened quite recently was they ran into another guild called The Watch. One of my favourite guilds ever. This was a guild, or an organisation that... this was like when we first decided to get back into playing as a group, actually. We played, me and Dom, Mike just ran us something off the cuff, like, with not much notice. We just decided, we're going to play a game of D&D. And it kind of just came out of nowhere, and it was again in the middle of lockdown. But what else were we going to do? And before then, we'd always played face-to-face, which is why we hadn't played for so long. Because as much as I do love playing in person, playing online, wow, I mean, how much D&D I get to play, because I solely play online for the most part. I say solely, not all the time, but for the most part. But yeah, anyway, all that to say, the first lockdown game was simply called The Watch, which is fun because I've been in a number of games and run a game called The Watch as well, but this was a different watch. This was The Watch, otherwise known as the Cudgel of St. Cuthbert. And I'm particularly proud of their lore. Me and Dom came up with it. And these are effectively like the lore for hire. And they worship, they're clerics mainly, or religious warriors, and they are devoted to the god St. Cuthbert from the Greyhawk deities. Our deities in our setting are mainly inspired by the Greyhawk gods, which I don't think many people are as familiar with, but I happen to think they're the best. But that's just me. But St. Cuthbert effectively is sort of like the... he's kind of like Talos in Skyrim in a lot of ways, or if dare I say it, other closer to home religious figures, where they, throughout their life, went through many trials and suffered great hardships, and then ascended to godhood. Well, St. Cuthbert suffered more than any living man could ever suffer. He was put through test after test after test that inflicted great pains upon him. The most notable one was him being effectively being battered to death. At least I think that's how he finally went out. But it was to show effectively that life is full of suffering, but that can make one better, that can make one ascend. And it's this very twisted ideology that the Watch have, that if suffering is shared with you, then that might make you better. Even if you happen to be an enemy, you might have that suffering shared with you. So the Watch can feel better about encountering you. But effectively, yeah, St. Cuthbert was ascended from these great trials of physical torment and became a god. And that's kind of the philosophy that the Watch have kind of taken the Cudgel of St. Cuthbert, and they put the cudgel into the Cudgel of St. Cuthbert, and they reign. I say they reign. They patrol with a kind of, yeah, it's a militant, extremist kind of philosophy to them. They are clerics, and they technically worship a good/neutral god, but that doesn't mean that they're good. And they're terrifying. They are really quite terrifying, and if they can help it, they won't kill you, because there's no pain once that's happened, is there? So they're pretty terrifying. All that to say, they met the Watch in the woods one day, and they were investigating the body of a murdered man, a man who had been murdered much the way that a number of victims that had been found in the same condition that the players had already come across. Those hobgoblins I mentioned earlier, they were in a cave that housed a number of these victims. Bones and skulls of people that had their teeth removed. This is something that's been quite cool with having Matt's character, Obsidian, have his form of profession be that of a mortician. Because we have quite a lot of CSI stuff going on at the moment. A lot of D&D CSI happening. Or CSI D&D. So he's able to sort of like do kind of like murder mystery stuff, where if there's a body of a particular encounter, or a body from a murder or whatever, then he can sort of investigate it. And that's actually something that I've not done an awful lot of. I've had the odd serial killer and stuff show up in various iterations of my games and things, and various crimes that have happened, but the idea of having like full-on crime scene investigations is something that kind of was like, oh, this is quite fun to have a sort of like a way of doing side missions in the game. Every now and then, Obsidian will have to use his education as a mortician to like understand how people have been killed and why they've been killed, and yeah, they discover that there's some kind of ritual going on where some mysterious entity is taking people out in a manner where they've not been able to fight back, by sheer overwhelming force have cut them down or slain them in some manner, and then taken all of their teeth. And this is the same for the body that the people that the Watch have found. And they then later discover the entity that has been doing that. And I got a really nice comment actually saying, it's nice to see, Rob, that you follow your own advice. Which I was really, really taken aback by how observant that was, but also how kind it was as well. And that was that this particular entity follows the archetype that I demonstrate in the disturbing villain video that I have on my channel. And I was like, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's a prime example. And I hadn't done it deliberately, but that's just how I do certain villains and how I tease the presence of certain villains. Like, this guy didn't show up for a while. They were discovering evidence of this character for a good number of sessions before ever encountering him. And when they did, I was pleased to say that his presence is effective and has continued to be effective ever since, for he is still at large. And yeah, I don't think I'm going to go into it that much more, to be honest. I think I've given sort of like a general overview of the campaign. I've given sort of like a rough I've alluded roughly to the story and to what's happening with the game at the moment, and the overall story is coming to the fore in these couple of sessions. I think if you wanted to jump on, if you haven't been watching as of yet, and you know what, I know actual play isn't for everyone, but if you wanted to jump on and you didn't want to watch all 9 of the sessions, admittedly all of them are about 4.5 hours to some of them are 5 hours long, so they're fairly hefty sessions. But if you wanted to jump on, I would suggest maybe starting at the episode called The Strangers, because that is that's the episode where I think the group, well, first of all, the group get their name, and this is actually, this is what I'll end on actually, and this will be a question for for those watching and for those of you who watched up until this point. A question for those of you who have sat through my ramblings whilst I've drunk wine. They had achieved that mission that I spoke of. They fought the pirates, and they had taken down the sea snakes at that cove, and Varates their captain. And the dockmaster, or the harbour master, who had given the bounty to bring the pirates in, said, well, of course, I'll happily make the arrangements for your payments, and should ever there be any other trouble, I would be glad to call upon you, for clearly if you've vanquished the sea snakes, then there's no telling what else you'll be able to achieve. But who shall I call for? And I hadn't really planned for this. Like, and this is the question I want to ask. I hadn't planned for them to. I mean, I hadn't planned for this to happen at all. I didn't know that they were going to come up with an epic name for their adventuring party, but they did. Ansel turned around and he said something along the lines of, I can't remember exactly how it happened, but one of them says, "Oh, we're just strangers passing through." And then Ansel turns around and goes, "And that's what we'll be called from now on, the Strangers." And suddenly I was like, oh my god, that is such a cool name for a group of adventurers, the Strangers. And it fits them so perfectly because, like I said, they're all pretty weird. They don't fit into a particular archetype. They're not a fighter, they're not mages, they're not rogues. They're just sort of these weird collection of classes that you've not really ever encountered before, and they're kind of like a weird mix. You don't really know what they're all about. I'm realising more and more that there's more of a horror slant to this game than I ever realised there was going to be, which is quite fun. But anyway, all that to say, the question I wanted to ask, dear viewers, this is why I shouldn't drink wine on a stream. The question I wanted to ask is, do you encourage adventuring names? Because I was thinking about this, right? Before I started playing online, and before I started creating content on Performance Check, or being involved in other games, or watching other games online, I don't think I ever had the main player characters ever have like a group name, like they were a band, or or they're a mercenary company or whatever. Which obviously, listen, in World it makes sense because you gotta be called something, right, for people to know who you are to hire you. But what if you aren't a mercenary company? What if you are just a group of adventurers? Do you have a name then? And then I ask myself, do you who run games, who I know run games, who watch this channel, do you always give your adventuring party names? Because I thought, well, I feel like half through practicality I've done this, but half I think from influence of other games and other content, and also being a game that is now shown online and a game that I have to write taglines about when I'm posting on YouTube, or when I'm posting in the Absolute Tabletop official group. Go and join if you haven't already. Still the best online tabletop role-playing community there is. When I'm posting there, plugging the game or saying, come watch the game, we're going live in a bit, like I always write a little bit of a blurb. I like doing that. It kind of sets up what you're going to expect. Oh, this game sounds interesting. Oh, what are they up to today over on Roll the Bones? I'll say the strangers arrive in the town of Korokwe, only to discover, and I realise, well, are they only names now because it's a convenience for online material, or does it serve the game? Do you know what I mean? So I would love to know, for those of you watching, please let me know in the comments if you use adventuring group names. If you do, why? Is it just because they're mercenaries and they need to be called something, or is it through influence of playing online yourself, creating content yourself? I'm sure I'm not the only person to think this. There's obviously there's the adventuring group names from Critical Role, like Vox Machina. There's the Provokers from our very own Abtab boys. There's a number of groups that, Acquisitions Incorporated. It's popular, but do we always need them? I like them, but I'm wondering, are there some people that never bother? Is it just because you're having to tell a story to other people not in the game that you're giving your adventuring parties names? Curious. I hope that makes sense anyway. I'm just wondering if there's anything else that I can leave this with. No, you know what? I think that'll do. I think I've rambled enough. For those watching, I hope you don't mind that this has just been a bit of a ramble. Hopefully you'll be able to listen to this and do something else. I like doing that with podcasts and stuff. I like listening to a podcast whilst playing a chill game where you don't really have to think about anything, or doing D&D prep myself. I like putting stuff on and listening to it whilst I prep for D&D games. I'm definitely going to do another stream because I realised the other thing I want to talk about, it's too late now, but I'll talk about it another time, is converting my DM style into running a game on Roll20, which is interesting because it actually adds to the prep time. So if there's anything you'd like me to discuss about preparing games, or if there's anything that you'd like me to talk about regarding anything else, then I'd love to hear from you. And of course, my offer still, my request still stands that if you always watch my stuff, or even if you're a newcomer and you this is the first video you've seen of me, if there's something that you think that you'd like to see on this channel, I'd be very curious to hear what it is, because I'd like to make stuff that people would enjoy, and I'd like to make stuff that that might test me and challenge me and take the channel in new and exciting ways. Because like I say, it's been a bit of a scrapbook as performance check, and I'm very proud of it. But I can't deny that it's got all sorts of stuff on it. So I'm not scared of doing different stuff. So if there's something that you can think of, let me know in the comments. Yeah, great. So I think I'm going to leave it there. But for those of you dropped in live, thank you ever so much. Much appreciated. Definitely look out for the Dyer's cast soon. Then I guess me and Lloyd are going to jump back on that at some point. Probably tackle the OGL and all of its misery. And listen, why not join us next time when we jump back into Knights of the Apocalypse? Where you will find us next is a very dangerous location indeed, where once again the players have already lost. Join us there. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I hope that all of your performances are up to standard. Take care.